So hello learners, welcome back. Today we'll be covering Chris Keller characterization from unit I think it's unit 4. Yeah. From unit 4 all my sons characterization part. So let's get started. Chris Keller, the son of Joe Keller, is a 32-year-old, well-built man who loves to keep himself informed of the latest publications of books and never misses to read the book section of the newspaper, though he never buys those books. So they're telling us something about Chris's peculiar character. It's his strange character. Chris is a 32-year-old guy. He's well built. Of course, he has to be because he has just left the army. He had just come back from fighting the World War II, so his physique is a well built one. And he loves to keep himself. This is peculiar, this is strange behavior that he likes to read the publications, the new books and magazines that are constantly being published. He likes to know about them through newspapers, and he never misses this book section of the newspaper, though he never buys those books. He never actually read those books. He only read which book has been published, which new magazine has come out. In the battlefront, Chris was called Mother McKellar in his battalion because he cared for everyone and was kind and sympathetic towards all of them. So they're saying that in the battlefront, in the war, in the field, Chris Keller was often called Mother McKellar. Mother McKellar, why? Because he cared for everyone like a mother would. So, and he was very kind. He was a kind and sympathetic guy. And just like we read previously, even Joe Keller was kind and sympathetic. So maybe he got this in his genes from his father. And battalion is a military unit. It typically consists of 300 to 1200 soldiers, which is commanded by a lieutenant colonel. It's like this in the US Army. So basically you can say that it is a group of soldiers. Returning from the war as a hero, Chris works for his father. So after Chris has retired from the war, he has now started working for his father. Chris is not fond of the company of women and does not mix with them except Anne, his only woman friend who had lived as a neighbor during childhood. So now we know something more about Chris and Anne's relationship. That they had been neighbors earlier. During their childhood, they had been neighbors, and Chris does not mix up with any other woman except for Anne. And he does not like women. After receiving several letters from Anne, he is convinced that she desires to marry him and has forgotten Larry completely. So after their several exchange of letters, now he is completely convinced through her words, through her way of writing, that she has forgotten Larry and now she is completely in love with me. He still wants to clear his doubts, but there is still a doubt, right? It happens with everyone of else, no matter how much we think that the other person loves us, unless the person clearly says it, we still have a kind of doubt that what if I'm wrong? So, in the same way, he still has some doubts. So, he wants to clear them by discussing with N and thereafter wants to convey his plans to his mother. And so, after discussing these plans, whether N really wants to marry him, then he wants to convey his plans to his mother. So, a straightforward guy, Chris decides to quit his house and family if he is not given consent by his mother to marry Anne. So, Chris is a very straightforward guy. He does not request, he does not beg his mother to please let me marry Anne, please let me do this. He does not go around sulking up to her, right? He's a straightforward guy. He just directly says that if you don't let me marry Anne, then I'm not gonna stay with you anymore. I'm gonna leave this house, I'm gonna leave the company, and I'm gonna go start somewhere else, live my own life within. So he's willing to stay with his parents and take charge of the business if only his father supports him to marry Anne. So he sets this condition in front of his father that if and only if you help me in marrying Anne, only then will I stay with you guys and take charge of your business. And this is his father's weak point because his father has always wanted Chris to inherit his business. Chris knows to deal with his mother with patience in order to please her to agree for this marriage with N. So Chris is smart enough. He knows that there is no rushing things up at this point. He must deal with his mother patiently and not force her to accept this marriage. Kate does not give up her hope of Larry's return, which is the biggest obstacle for Chris' marriage. So, the biggest obstacle that's hindering Chris from marrying Anne is that Kate is not losing hope that Larry will come back. Though it is a fake one, we all know that she has just set up her mind in order to reduce the guilty feeling of her husband being a criminal. But still, she does not let go of this one chain, that Larry is somewhere still alive, Larry will come back, and she keeps on repeating, keeps on saying this to other members of the family. Chris has a selfish motive in pursuing his mother to accept Larry's death. Now, yeah, this might look a little bit selfish. Chris is not pursuing his mother to accept Larry's death so that she can get over this trauma, so that she can live her life happily in a better way. He's doing this so that he can get married with Anne. So in this way, we can say that Chris is a bit selfish here. He does so for her own selfish reasons and not because he thinks it is in her best interest to be able to face reality. Right? Chris' sincere love for Anne. So, like, it's a very similar situation. If we compare this situation, it's like when someone's parent die. Let's say someone's father dies, for example, or someone's parents dies. So there is a conflict of property now, right? So the people are grieving on his grave. Actually, they are grieving on his funeral. But in their brains, in their minds, it's constantly working out how to get the property papers, how to get all that property. How can I be the sole master of this house? So in their brain, these kinds of things are constantly working out. Though on the surface they are showing that, oh, I'm so sad, my father is no more, my mother is no more. On the surface they are showing it to be like this. And yeah, there is some amount of grief, no doubt there is some amount of grief. But in the end, their actual motive is to grab that property, is to grab that whatever he has left behind. So in this same way, Chris is also doing this kind of selfish act, though he does want his mother to face reality. But for more important than that is marrying Anne. Chris's, you can read it as Chris's, not Chris, or you can simply read it as Chris or Chris's. Yeah, in case, let me tell you this one thing. In case there is an S sound, right, or an S word in the last in this word, there is the letter S in the last phrase, right? So what do we do in this case? In this case, if we want to write an apostrophe, we put it after that S, right? We will not type 2S. We will not type 2S in here. We will just put the apostrophe after S. In many cases, like let's say fathers, we want to write fathers. Then what do we say? How do we write it? We write it like FATHER, then apostrophe and S. It means father ka ya father ki, right? But in case the last letter already has S in it. For example, let's say not marks. Let's for instance say marks. So it's MARKS, right? So you cannot write it as MARKS and then apostrophe, then again S, to indicate that it is marks ka ya marks ki. You just write it like MARKS and then apostrophe, right? No double S, only only a single S, and the apostrophe would be after S. Just like they've written Chris here. In here they've written Chris. So this is the right form to write these words. So Chris's sincere love for Anne makes him protective towards her, forcing him to argue with his mother several times whenever Kate tries to discourage their marriage. So Chris is very sincere about his love for Anne, and for this reason he even argues with his own mother whenever she tries to discourage their marriage, as she has done on several occasions, just like we read previously. An idealist, Chris feels guilty of surviving the war when many of his friends died sacrificing their lives in the war for some noble cause. So Chris is an idealist and he feels really guilty. He feels that maybe I shouldn't have survived this war. Maybe I should have died just like my other companions died, just like my other companions did. So before that, I think we should first understand what an idealist person is. An idealist is a person who cherishes or pursues high or noble principles, purposes, or goals. So a visionary or impractical person. So someone who has a very high vision, very noble vision, that person can be said to be an idealist. So in the same way, Chris is an idealist and he feels guilty. In the same way he feels guilty that though it is not for because of Chris, it is not Chris's fault that he survived the war. In fact, everyone should have tried his best to survive the war while fighting, while trying their best to defend their country, right? But it so happens that not everyone can survive. Some sacrifices are they have to be made. Some sacrifices are inevitable, and some people definitely survive. Not everyone dies either. So Chris can be said to be that lucky guy, but he blames his luck for making him survive, and he feels guilty that I don't think I should have survived the war. Somebody else have survived in my place. He feels in this way. So he feels guilty that many of his friends whom he loved so dearly, they all died in the war for this noble cause. And on his return home after the war, he saw that nothing had changed. Chris is amazed to see the way people carry on with the banalities of life. Banalities, you can say, banality is a very uh, it's a very difficult to explain word actually. Banality is not explained clearly anywhere, but I'll give you an alternative word for banalities. Banalities means daily, day-to-day activities of life. Our day-to-day activity or daily activities of life, normal activities like whatever we do. So was Chris is amazed. He's amazed to see that how people are still doing their day-to-day activities, how people are still carrying on with their day-to-day activities as if nothing had changed, as if there had been no change from the previous conditions. See, right? So like previously also people were selfish, people were vicious, people were unkind to each other, like in most cases, not in every case of course, but in most cases still they try to cheat people, right? And even after the war people are still the same. They shun others, they do not try to help others in need, and they are dishonest and cheaters. So he feels ashamed seeing selfish people struggling for monetary gains. For Chris, the soldiers' lives were laid down in vain because it did not change the world. So for the soldiers fighting out in the battlefront, in the field, they were thinking that we are doing this for a noble cause. We are doing this so that the people will, so that this world will change. It will become a better place. But he's amazed to see. He's very saddened by this fact that nothing has actually changed and all they did was in vain. It didn't bring any change to the society, to the people. He was hesitant to use the amenities and comforts that he had and was guilty even to marry Anne. So his idealistic approach made him guilty, made him feel disheartened to even use his day-to-day amenities, his comforts that he very rightfully deserved. So even this made him feel guilty, and even now the thought of marrying N here means that settling down with a life, with a family, settling down in a happy, because everyone's ultimate dream is to finally settle down, have a family, lead a good life, right? So this also makes Chris feels guilty. He thinks about how his fellow soldiers also must have wanted to do this, how his fellow soldiers would have also thought about having such a kind of life, but it can never happen again, or it can never happen. So these are Kristen's thoughts. So next on, Chris' influence on her husband Jim Bayless upsets Sue. So they've written it a bit wrong. It shouldn't be like this. In this sense, it seems like Chris' influence on his husband. But in fact, it is like Chris's influence on Sue's husband, Sue, their neighbor. So Sue's husband's name is Jim Bayless. So Sue is actually upset about Chris due to his influence on her husband, whose name is Jim Bellis. So Chris tries to encourage Jim Bellis to give up medical practice in order to pursue a higher calling in medical research. So Chris tries to encourage his friend and neighbor Jim Bellis that you should give up medical practice and you should go for medical research, because Jim has previously discussed with Chris that how he feels connected with medical research, how he feels that he does not want to do this medical practice and wants to go for research. So Chris understands this and he encourages Jim that yeah, this is the right path. If you feel that this is the thing for you, this is your path, then you should go on it. You shouldn't worry about what others say or what others will feel. Accusing Chris of being a hypocrite, Sue is of the opinion that Chris wants people to sacrifice their comforts for the sake of principles. So Sue Bellis, their neighbor, and Jim Bellis's wife, accuses Chris that Chris is a hypocrite. He wants other people to sacrifice their comfort for their principles, while Chris himself takes money from his father's business that is established by dishonest means. So she's saying that Chris, on one hand, wants that other people should sacrifice their comforts. They should not live a comfortable life and, in fact, go for their principles, go what their principle says, while Chris himself is taking money from his father's business, and that business is established due to dishonest means. So he's taking dishonest money, he is living off dishonest money, whereas he is asking other people to live honestly, to live with principles. Out of love for his parents, he assures them of his protection if a difficult situation came up on George's arrival to the Keller household. So, Chris assures his parents, because he loves them, of course, that if some kind of difficult situation arises after George arrives in the Keller household, I'll make sure to help you. I'll stand up with you. I'll try my best to protect you. The immense faith Chris had in his father does not allow him to accept his father's guilt, despite having a vague idea about the fraud committed by him. So Chris had he had immense faith in his father, and despite he had a little bit of idea, he had a little bit of, you can say, shock in his mind, somewhere inside, that maybe his father really did commit the crime. But he didn't let it take over. He didn't let it actually come out to the surface, because he was afraid. He was scared and afraid to believe that his father could be a guilty person, that his father could be a criminal. So he never let it surface onto the outside, right? He always hid it deep inside, that no, I'm just overthinking things, no, this cannot be, I'm just making assumptions, something like this, like it happens with most of us too. I guess you can relate. Chris believes that his father is innocent and that he is being falsely accused by the neighbors. So this happens somewhere, right? Like if you know about a person, that this person is of this character, but you love him immensely, so someone accuses that person that he did this crime, so you keep on defending him. Keep on saying, no, he didn't did this, he cannot do this, he's such a good person, such a nice person. You say all these things out of love, but somewhere you know deep inside that his character is like this, he could have committed this crime. But even you don't want to believe it to yourself. You don't even want to say it to yourself that yeah, he did this crime. You want to believe that he did not do this crime, he couldn't have done it. So same is the situation with Chris believes that his father is innocent and that he is being falsely accused by the neighbors. Believing that Steve Deaver had wrongly implicated his father, he does not want Keller to show so much concern for him. So Chris Keller believes that Steve Deaver wrongly included his father into the case. He did a very wrong thing by making false charges against his father, and he is upset about the thing that his father, Joe Keller, is showing Steve Deaver so much concern, is showing so much concern about Steve Deaver. He is afraid that the people of the locality, that the neighborhood might misunderstand this if he accommodates him in his factory, that the people might misunderstand that why is he sheltering a criminal, that Steve Deaver was a criminal, so why is he giving him a job in his factory? Why is him accommodating him back? Then there must be some connection between them. They must have made some kind of deal or maybe something like this. So he's saying that we shouldn't have any connections, at least directly, with a criminal like Steve Deaver, because other people might misunderstand this. Chris is sure that a timid man like Steve Deaver would not only supply defective cylinder heads but also put the blame on somebody else. So Chris is saying that timid, that is easily frightened, shy and nervous. So we know something about Steve Deaver's character from here. He was a shy and nervous kind of person. So he's saying that such a timid person as Steve Deaver can do such a thing for the sake of money and then put the blame on someone else, because he does not have any guts. He is a very scared person, a very timid person. He has no courage. In Chris's opinion, Steve conveniently puts the blame for his misdeeds on Keller, but his plans failed. So, in accordance to Chris, it was very convenient. It was very easy for Steve Deaver to put the blame on Joe Keller, as it was a very easily believable lie. But he still failed to go on with his misdeeds. His plans failed, and he landed up in jail. He says that only George, who is a fool, believes his story. So Chris is saying that George, who is Steve Deaver's son, is foolish to believe his father's story. No one else will. Chris does not believe in astrology. He refuses to agree with Kate and questions her view on how stars determine human destiny. So Chris is not a believer in astrology, and he refuses with Kate that no stars can determine the human destiny. You would understand this part if you will actually read the play. So there in the play there's a part, I think, where Kate tries to conclude through the movement of the stars whether Larry is alive or not. So Chris argues with her about this, that no, there is no such things uh, as here stars determining the human destiny, right? So Chris, who loves his parents, trusts his father and is shattered when his father accepts his guilt. So Chris, you can imagine the kind of pain that Chris must have felt when his father accepted the fact that, yeah, I am the guilty person, I am the main conspirator, I am who did this all. Chris considers him an infallible father figure. Infallible means without any faults, a perfect father figure. So Chris thought of him as a perfect father figure, and he is ashamed by the arguments given by his father in order to justify his actions. So obviously now his father put up some justifications for his part, that why I had to do this, why I did this. So Chris is very ashamed of this. Chris is you can say, like, I can't get that word. It just can't. It's just not coming into my mind. So let's move on. Chris is his father's perfect opposite. So Chris is a perfect opposite of his father. Yeah, the word is disgusted. So Chris is disgusted by his father's justifications. While Joe cannot see beyond his family's dining room table, Chris feels a sense of unity with the world. So Joe cannot see beyond his. This is a kind of phrase. This is a kind of phrase, you can say. It's a kind of metaphor. So they're saying that because obviously on the family dining room table, only Joe's immediate family would be there. So they're indirectly trying to say that while Joe Keller cannot look beyond his immediate family, Chris feels that he is united with the whole world. Chris is profoundly means deeply. Chris is profoundly hurt that Keller has deceived his partner Steve Deaver and his own country. So Keller is very, very deeply hurt that his father deceived not just his partner Steve Deaver, who believed in him, but his whole country, his own country. Chris sees a wider responsibility beyond that of a family, a human commitment. So Chris sees something beyond a family, something like a human connection, like any human would have with any other human. He is ashamed of his father being involved in such a criminal act while he was fighting in the war and risking his life daily, and the men under his command were dying daily in the war. He says that the selflessness of his fellow soldiers has counted for nothing. So he's saying that you here were being selfish, making monetary gains for your own comforts, for your own family's comforts. Other people were rushing ahead to make money for their own selfish purposes, and me and my soldiers were selflessly dying for all of you people. Why did this happen? Was it worth it? No. He accuses his father of making money out of a business which does not value the man on whose labor it relies. So obviously his father's, in fact everyone's business relied on the labor of those army people, army men, of those soldiers that were fighting in the battlefront. In the world war, if there was no army for the US, no army to the US, no people to defend their country, US would have fallen, right? There wouldn't have been any factories to work in, there wouldn't have been any factories to make money from. So he's saying that you are relying on the labor of those soldiers who are dying for you so that you can establish these factories and make money out of it, but you do not value the lives of those soldiers. You are in fact bent on killing them. You don't care about their lives. You don't care whether they use the right equipment or don't, whether they die due to your carelessness, due to your selfish motives or not. You do not care about it. Joe is also accused of ignoring the interests of his country and deliberately endangering the lives of the countrymen. So Chris also accuses Joe that you ignored the country, you ignored what was good for the country, and you endangered the lives of the countrymen. Because if it was done on a bigger scale, or even on the smaller scale, if it was a very crucial operation, and due to these engine defaults, the pilots, the soldiers died, and it would have been a huge blow to the country itself. Suppose the foreign forces would have invaded America, then it would have been endangering the lives of whole of the countrymen, right? It's not, it was like within a limited scope or within the country that nothing big will happen, it won't impact the whole of the country. His actions could have impacted, could have endangered the lives of all the countrymen. After his father's guilt is revealed, Chris sees no other option but to put his father in jail. Keller, on the other hand, tries to escape from his guilt to save his son from further humiliation. He shoots himself. Chris blames himself for his father's self-destruction. Now Chris is again thinking that maybe I did this wrong. Maybe I shouldn't have behaved like this from with my father, and then this wouldn't have happened because due to of course his idealist character. So Chris is again bent on blaming himself that no, this is my fault. I did this. I killed him. Something like that. But of course, we understand how his mother Kate consoles him. So in the next video, we will talk about Kate Keller's characterization. So that's it for now.